Hey everyone, Dr. Frunky here with a really awesome new knife console for you on the Custom Knife Factory FIF20. If you go back on my channel, you will see some videos on the original Philippe Jourget FIF20 as well as the FIF23. These are custom knives made by a French knife maker, Philippe Jourget, whose logo can be seen here on this knife. This is one of the only production Philippe Jourget knives that I certainly know about, and it is very exciting because this is the smaller version of the FIF23 that was released some months ago by Custom Knife Factory. The FIF23, as you'll recall, was a much larger knife with basically a 4-inch blade. This one is actually coming in under 3.5 inches for a nice tight EDC size. You should go back and familiarize yourself with the custom version so that you have a little bit more understanding about this knife. I will leave those links down below in the comments. So, again, designed by Philippe Jourget, this has M390 blades, zirconium bolsters, and carbon fiber scales. This knife is coming in at about $580. In custom form, this knife might cost you over $1,200 to $1,300. In its current form, the bolster lock versions cost a bit more. And so it's exciting to see this being offered in this sort of high-end trim for production prices. So very, very exciting. Let's go ahead and get some vital signs on this guy so we can see what we're working with. Up front, you have that blade. As I mentioned, it's just under 3.5 inches. I'm calling it about 3.4 inches, somewhere right around there. Overall, you're a hair under 8 inches. You're like 7.9 inches, something like that. And then if you look at the handle length, you're at about 4.3 inches of overall handle length and an effective grip space of about 4 inches as well. So more or less, this is going to fall into the perfect size category for a nice high-end EDC. Here comes the Spyderco Para 2 and the Para 3 as a size comparison. So as you can see, it slots right in between, favoring the Para 2 size profile there. But you can see you get way more blade than the Para 2 with a handle that's even smaller than the Para 3. Very impressive use of real estate with this knife. That's one of the things that makes the custom so special, is that you get a ton of blade in a very, very compact handle. Part of what helps with that is the front flipper design here, so that you just have less going on in the back and less going on around this frame. Around the pivot allows you to maximize your space in there, and just the overall design is brilliant. And as you can see, it tapers all the way to the end of the handle here, and obviously it's going to be off center for the video. That is something that we're going to discuss here as we play with the knife. So let's go ahead and break this guy down anatomically. Up front is this wonderful blade of M390 steel, as I mentioned before, done in a beautiful hand-rubbed satin. Custom Knife Factory's quality and fit and finish is excellently on display here. They do a beautiful hand rub. This blade is awesome. Just like its bigger brother, it is a full flat ground blade with a very high grind. Comes down to a very thin area behind the edge. It's an incredible slicer. Comes very sharp. The secondary bevel is rather tiny, mostly for appearances, but this blade is extremely sharp and it works extremely well, just like its bigger brother. One of the great things about this knife is that they did not just taper it. They did not just use the original blade stock. They actually thinned this out to 140 thousandths on the blade stock right there. So that's really exciting to me, because they could have just used very thick blade stock, but they decided to make it thinner to just make the overall knife experience actually much, much better. It performs similarly to its big brother in terms of the cutting performance, and that is a great, great thing. Some of the things I like about this blade is the placement of the logos. Here you can see Philippe's logo into that cutout there. And here you see the Custom Knife Factory logo mirrored on the other side. This is similar to Philippe's custom work. It's just very cool to see that placement right there. The blade, as I mentioned, is a front flipper. The tab here is very easy to use. The detent is set very perfectly. We'll talk about that as we get to it. But the deployment is very easy with that tab. The jimping is very effective. It is grippy but not sharp. and it works very well for putting your thumb there and just flipping the knife open easily. It is not difficult to do that, and it is not uncomfortable. Some front flippers have some trouble, but obviously this is a tried and true knife from Philippe, and so it functions well even as the production model. Moving back to the pivot, this is where we start to get into some of the production magic of CKF. Inside we are running on ceramic bearings with phosphor bronze washers. One of the interesting and great things about the CKF brand is that they send you the knife in these kits that have all this stuff. First, there's a piece of chocolate in true Russian form. There's some swag, but most importantly, there's an entire set of replacement hardware. You have race bearings, you have the bearing washers with the ceramic bearings, you have the internal screws, you even have a over travel stop lock bar insert, and you even have a replacement pivot and clip. And that's super helpful because these things tend to be limited run models and have only about, I think this knife is going to have somewhere around 400 or so that get out into the wild, and then it will never be made again. So it's nice to have those replacement parts. It would be crazy if they sent scales and bolsters as well, but that would basically just be a second knife, and you'd probably have to pay for that one. But it's nice to see that that stuff is included for this otherwise pretty high price of $580. The action on this pivot is incredibly smooth, as you have been seeing. The detent is tuned absolutely perfectly for a very fast and smooth deployment. Just like the bigger brother, if you give it a hard enough shake, the blade will come out. It's not the strongest detent in the world. I might have liked to see the detent a little bit stronger on both the big brother and this one. The custom versions have much stronger detents, almost too strong. But this one is a little bit on the lighter side. This is going to be easier for the masses to enjoy. It's easier to deploy a front flipper with a slightly lighter detent. And so a lot of custom makers do that. The original Chamoises had very light detents as well, and many other front flippers do. That is not a knock against the knife. It's just an understanding. If you've handled other front flippers, you are probably aware of the wide variation in the detent strengths and how that affects flipping. This one is very easy to flip. Super smooth action, drop shut under its own weight. The bigger bladed FIF20 had a bit more of a substantial action to it. The blade was much bigger and heavier, and so it really flew out with authority, and it slid down a little bit more quickly. But as you can see, I don't even have to do much. One simple shake and the blade falls under its own weight. I've had this now for a couple of weeks to allow it to break in to see how this would go. And it has broken in beautifully. Amazing, amazing action right there. Really, really well done. One of the complaints that I have about this knife, and if you go and watch Epic Snuggle Bunny's video, he has a similar problem, and he referred to my knife without naming my name. That was very nice of him. But take a look here at the detent. If I hold the knife with the blade towards the ground and I touch the blade, there's a half of a millimeter of blade wiggle. Maybe you can see it here at the distal end of the blade. You can see maybe some of it goes down in. It's very, very minor, but for those of us that are used to sort of reviewing and evaluating knives, this is, it could be annoying for some. I was able to tune out a significant amount of it by disassembling the knife and putting it back together. There's significantly less of that detent play. I think that the detent hole may be, you know, a hair a little bit too big for the detent ball itself. And it may not be, this may not be the only example that has that. Saying that Bunny's has it as well is just something to look out for. Some, Eugene Kwan also got one of these that does not appear to have that detent play. There is no play on the flipper tab as I wiggle it here. I cannot feel it. There's a slight hint. I don't know if that noise is coming through. There's just the slightest hint of wiggle as I wiggle the knife. That is not present on a lot of knives, and so it's something that if you're a true OCD perfectionist, it could make or break the knife for you. It does not for me. It does not affect my carry in any way. It does not make this knife less safe. It does not open when it's in the pocket, and so that is not a deal breaker for me. But I would, it is my due diligence to tell you of any imperfections that I see here. Let's go ahead and move back to the bolsters here. This is one of the focal points of the knife. This is zirconium. This is zirconium. The back spacer is zirconium as well. This time, instead of the shiny finish, they decided to go with a matte bead blasted finish. And I am a huge proponent of this because it makes it much more subtle, and it gets rid of the fingerprinting that happens so badly on that polished zirconium of the FIF20. It also provides a nice contrast. So many of the surfaces on this knife are shiny already. The blade, the hardware. It's nice to have it be matte. It matches the rest of the handle a little bit better, in my opinion, and I think it looks overall a little bit better. Now, zirconium is a bit of a touchy thing. It is heated on the outside to form a black oxide layer. That is somewhere around 70 Rockwell, so it's very durable. But as you can see, if you get a little scratch on it, let me see, I think I have a little scratch on mine. It actually came that way from the factory, but if you can see, there's a tiny little spot right there. It can scratch that away. Zirconium is an interesting material. If you have one of those torch lighters, you can actually just heat this up and that spot should go away, and it should look exactly the same because the material is finished. So if you're brave enough to do such a thing, I know that Nick Shabazz made a video on that at some point a while ago. It should be a relatively easy fix even for the average Joe. So I'm not overly worried about that either. Zirconium is a very durable material, although it does make this knife a little bit heavier maybe than it needs to be. So I'm going to show you the weight on this guy. Despite some extensive internal milling, it comes in at 4.58 ounces. So 3.4 inches, 3.5 inches, 4.5 ounces. It's a little bit heavy, but it's just heavy enough to give it that premium feel without being a burden. So I'm able to carry this in scrubs very easily at 4.5 ounces. I'm very happy with that weight. I do think that they are planning to do some titanium bolstered versions, some plain titanium with some other carbon fiber. They are also planning to do some full dress models with Damasteel and Damascus, and so keep an eye out for those later this year, probably much later this year, like Christmas time. Those are going to be much more expensive though, almost double the price of this base model. Moving back to the scales, you're going to see this awesome sort of crushed, shredded, forged type carbon fiber. It's a very handsome material, has a nice chatoyance to it. It's very uniform. This type of material is always going to have some micro voids in it. This type of shred carbon fiber is never 100% voidless. And so another thing, if you're super OCD about your carbon fiber, that's another thing. It does not bother me. Obviously, I have tons of other knives that have this kind of shred or marbled carbon fiber. Here is the Miura, just for a nice little cameo right here, the Gareth Bull Miura. Another excellent front flipper knife. Why don't I just go ahead and put these guys side by side so you can see this is falling right into that same size category as my Miura, which is also a 3.5 inch blade. So it's pretty much perfect for my everyday carry purposes. The carbon fiber is nice and lightweight, and these scales feel very durable. Matching the bolsters, there's a nice chamfer right here for comfort, and it is very nice in the hand. The carbon fiber has a warmth to it. The zirconium tends to be a cold metal, but it's nice to put your hands on the neutral carbon fiber as you're holding the knife. Provides a nice grip to it, and it's super cool. Moving back to the back spacer, I mentioned it's zirconium. I appreciate these chamfers right here. It gives it some depth to the handle. These things do accumulate dust, and so it's important to get some compressed air and blow it out from time to time. On the inside of the knife, I wish I could show you it exploded, basically. There is extensive internal milling. I've posted a picture on Instagram of the internals here, and it's very impressive. There's internal milling on both sides, pocketed extensively, and it's very beautifully built. So the carbon fiber scale comes off. There are internal screws that go across to the other side and hold the knife stable here. And then this pivot screw comes out. The scales, the bolsters are actually affixed to the frames via internal screws. I can actually show you that if I get the angle right there. If you see that internal screw, it's holding the bolster in place. So that comes apart, and then you have the frame. On the inside, you can see that there is a steel lock bar insert. Some people have noticed the lock bar insert screw is rather prominent. Because of the thinness of this lock bar, the screw sticks out, the head of the screw sticks out. There's a little pocket milled into the bolster to accommodate that, and as you close the knife, it slides right into that. As you can see, there's also the steel designation of M390 as well as the number, the serial number. I got lucky enough to get FIF20 number 20, and so that's kind of cool to me. I thought that might just be the model number of 20, but I saw that Austin Epic Snuggle Bunny had number 84, so pretty cool to have FIF20 number 20 right here. Just a little thing for me. Moving back to the clip, there's a one minor complaint on this knife, might be the clip, and only because this leading edge right here could have been chamfered one more time. It's a little bit on the sharp side. It does not provide a hot spot for my hand, but I can feel it kind of when I'm handling the knife. This is a very fidgety type of knife, very fun to play with all day. Have it in your hand as almost a stress ball type of thing. And you start to notice this over time. It doesn't hurt, but it's just there. And I feel like, just like the rest of this clip that's so well chamfered and smooth, that this tip right here could have just been knocked back a tiny bit more for a better feel. But that is probably the only spot on this knife that I've noticed that was not touched or perfectly chamfered. Everything else is nice and well angled. It's not sharp. Even though this knife has some geometric shapes, none of these things are uncomfortable, including these are not sharp here to the fingers. And so it's just unusual that they left this one leading edge right here where everything else seems to be so well thought out. So what do I think of this knife? This may be my favorite production knife of the year. It's certainly way up there. I know we're very early in 2020. We're only in January right now, but Philippe Jourget is one of those makers that just makes the unicorn type of knives. Just the perfect combination of function and form. And here we have a true to form production model made out of this. You know, a lot of these makers go to companies like Boker or ZT or somebody, and they sort of make a Boker might make a 30% accurate knife, ZT might make a 75% accurate knife, but CKF has made basically a 95% accurate knife here with some very, very minor differences between this and the custom. And if I'm honest with you, there are certain things about these productions that are, I'll just say it, better than the customs. It's rare for Philippe to work in M390. He normally works in CPM 154. We could argue all day about steels and their virtues, but arguably this is a better steel. The ceramic bearing upgrades and the materials, the internally milled frames. Philippe just has flat frames. There are certain things about this knife that may be considered improvements even to the custom, despite that it's a production knife. So it's interesting to me to see this combination of Philippe's design and CKF's engineering and manufacturing. They have knocked it out of the park. This is a fantastic knife and may be a candidate for Knife of the Year. There are not many knives, I'll put it this way. There are 0 knives in the past that I have asked for companies to send to me so that I can evaluate. This time, I asked. I never ask. I always let them come to me. This was one of those knives that I could not pass up because this is going to be one of the best production knives maybe ever. For the true modern knife guy, this is it. The FIF20 is pretty much perfect. It nails all the things that knife guys in 2020 are looking for. It's got the front flip, it's got the premium materials, and it's got the true to form custom appearance and all the quality bits and pieces that we've come to expect from high-end knife manufacturers. So I could not be happier with this knife. I could not be more impressed, and it's going to take an act of God to get this out of my hands. So thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think of the FIF20 down below. I'm going to leave some links to the other videos about Philippe Jourget, so you can check those out. Go ahead and follow me on Instagram as Dr. Frunky. Check me out on Patreon and try to support me a little bit at patreon.com/Dr. Frunky. And as always, guys, this is Dr. Frunky saying, take care.